They say every neighborhood has rules. I just didn't know mine came with conditions for compassion. The day we pulled up to Maple Oaks Crossing, it felt like we were arriving on the set of a quiet commercial. Beige homes with identical shutters. Lawns so precisely trimmed you'd think there was a secret measuring stick somewhere. Even the birds sounded like they'd signed a noise ordinance. My daughter Ava sat in the back seat, her wheelchair folded beside her, a stack of pillows under her from the 2-hour ride. She looked out the window, wide-eyed, as we turned into our new street. "Are we really here?" she asked. We were. After 6 years, in a walk-up apartment with cracked windows and neighbors who fought through the walls, I had finally found us something better. Not perfect, not even easy, but better. Before we go any further, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any more HOA horror stories. Now let's get back to it. So, our new house was the one at the end of the cul-de-sac. The only one without flower beds, and the only driveway with a cracked line running through the center. But it was ours. I bought it with everything I had. My savings, what was left of the small inheritance my mother left me, and a whole lot of faith that I could make it work. Ava had spinal surgery just 3 months ago. It didn't go badly, but the recovery was slow. Her legs hadn't carried her in months. Every time I lifted her, I could feel how light she'd gotten. Her spirit wasn't gone, but it was quieter, tired. And I knew that recovery didn't just need doctors. It needed space. It needed light. It needed peace. Maple Oaks Crossing came highly recommended. Great schools, clean parks, quiet neighbors, the real estate agent told me. She didn't mention the HOA until the final walkthrough. "They're a little picky," she said with a smile, "but it keeps the place beautiful." I should have known that picky would turn into something else. The second day after we moved in, my brother Mark came by with his truck. He's a handyman. He knows wood, nails, angles. Together, we built a simple ramp over the front steps. Just something temporary. Sturdy plywood, smooth finish, strong rail on one side. It wasn't painted. It wasn't pretty. But it worked. Ava could get into the house. That's all I cared about. I didn't ask for permission. Honestly, I didn't think I needed it. It was a ramp, not a hot tub or a trampoline. It wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. Ava watched us build it from the window, her nose pressed to the glass, her stuffed bear in her lap. When we were done, she clapped. I didn't know she still did that. That evening, as the sun dipped low and fireflies came out like a slow parade, we sat on the porch together. The ramp beneath us still smelled like sawdust. Ava leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I like it here." I didn't say anything. I just stared out at the street, at the perfect lawns, the matching mailboxes, the little sign at the cul-de-sac entrance that read, "Community pride starts at home." I felt proud. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we belonged. But here's the thing about illusions. You don't know how thin they are until something heavy lands on them. And for almost a year, nothing did. Life in Maple Oaks Crossing settled into a quiet routine. Ava's recovery moved slowly but steadily. She could sit up on her own now, scoot with her arms, even navigate corners in her wheelchair like a pro. The ramp my brother and I built, still unpainted, still sturdy, became just another part of the house, like the mailbox, like the front door. No one said a word. We trimmed the lawn. We waved at neighbors. I brought cookies to the fall festival. There were smiles. There were nods. There was silence. I thought maybe they had looked the other way, understood what it meant to be a mother first and a homeowner second. And then, just like that, the letter came. It was folded quietly between a water bill and grocery coupons. No knock at the door, no warning, just a plain white envelope with the HO's name in the corner. Maple Oaks Crossing Homeowners Association. I opened it while Ava was napping, her therapy session that morning having drained her completely. She was curled on the couch with her stuffed bear, her legs cradled in a wedge pillow, mouth slightly open in the kind of sleep that only comes after pain. Dear resident, you are in violation of Article 4B, Structural Aesthetic Modifications. A non-approved exterior addition, specifically a wooden ramp, has been installed at the front entryway of your property without prior authorization. This is a direct breach of community guidelines. You are hereby instructed to remove said structure within 7 calendar days of receipt of this notice. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $500.00 for the first 7 days past the deadline and an additional $1.00 per day beginning on day 8. Further noncompliance may result in lien placement or legal enforcement. I stared at the page, reading it 3 times, each word louder than the last. 7 days, and then they'd start draining me. $500 a day. Then $1,000. $500 a day. Not once, not capped. Daily, and that is just for the first week. Then $1.00 a day with no cap. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew exactly what this meant. They were going to bleed me out. And for what? For a ramp that kept my daughter alive? I called the number listed at the bottom. It rang 6 times before a woman picked up. Her voice was smooth, pre-programmed. Maple Oaks Crossing Administrative Office. How can I help you? I told her everything. That my daughter was disabled. That she had undergone spinal surgery. That the ramp wasn't a luxury, it was medical necessity. I said we moved here for stability, for safety. I begged. She didn't interrupt. She waited. And then she said, all exterior modifications require prior approval. Regardless of circumstance, you may file a formal appeal at the next board meeting. I asked if there was a fast-track process, an emergency clause, something for ADA needs. She said no. I asked what would happen if I didn't take the ramp down in time. Daily fines will be issued starting on day 1, she said. After the initial period, escalation procedures will apply. A lien may be filed. The structure may be forcibly removed. I asked, coldly, and what happens when you remove it and my daughter can't get into her home? She paused for less than a second. We're just enforcing the rules. That sentence stayed in my head the rest of the day. They knew. They knew Ava was in a wheelchair. They knew she couldn't climb stairs. They knew the ramp was her only access point to enter and exit the house. They knew what removing it would mean. And they did it anyway. That's what struck me. Not the money. Not the deadlines. Not even the legal threats. It was the inhumanity of it. The fact that they looked at my daughter's safety and saw a code violation. They saw her freedom and saw a threat to uniformity. I sat down with a pad of paper and a calculator. Medical bills, $2,400.00 on one credit card, $700.00 overdue on another, cell bill skipped last month, car insurance in grace period, groceries getting lighter. I had $83.00 in checking and $140.00 in savings. Rent was gone. Thank God I had bought the house. But taxes? Up next month. I started scratching out the math. If I missed the deadline, that was $500.00 a day, $3.50 in just the first week. Then starting on day 8, the fines would jump to $1.00 a day. Another week of that, that's $7.00 more. 10 days late would cost me $10.00. 2 weeks late, $17,000. It didn't feel like enforcement. It felt like extortion. Like they wanted to bury me so deep in fines that I'd crawl away just to breathe. And the worst part? I was already drowning before they even started. And if I complied? If I removed the ramp? There was no back entrance, no side door with a slope, just stairs. Stairs Ava couldn't walk. Stairs I couldn't carry her up without hurting her, and maybe myself. My body was still paying the price for all the months I'd had to lift her everywhere. Removing that ramp didn't just trap her inside, it made the house unlivable. And the HOA knew that. They knew all of it. They just didn't care. That night, Ava woke up asking for juice. I brought her a cup and tucked a blanket back around her legs. She didn't ask about the letter. She didn't know it existed. But as I watched her drift off again, I felt something shift in me. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was the understanding that I was alone. That compassion wouldn't come by mail. That fairness wouldn't arrive in the form of a phone call or a smiling neighbor. This was going to get worse before it got better. And I had less than 2 weeks to choose: lose the ramp or lose everything else. By day 4, the letter was still on the fridge, and I'd memorized every word. I'd been rereading it, the way you'd reread a warning label on a bottle of poison, knowing what it says, hoping maybe you missed something. $500 0 cents per day for the first 7 days past the deadline. $1,000 0 cents a day beginning on day 8. And if I refused to remove the ramp, they'd escalate to legal enforcement, a lien, a court summons. They could take the house. I tried to focus on work, but my emails went unanswered. My phone rang with numbers I didn't recognize. My sleep came in fits. Ava's therapy bills were due again next month, and the last payment had barely cleared. By day 5, I started calculating what I could sell. My laptop, old jewelry, the couch. By day 6, I was staring at the ramp like it was a crime scene. Not because it was, but because someone decided to treat it that way. That's when I saw Ava struggling to unlock the front door from her chair. She'd been trying to practice it alone, her tiny arms pushing up, trying to balance, to turn the knob with just the edge of her palm. That's when it snapped in me. Not rage, not yet, just resolve. I wouldn't take that ramp down. I couldn't. But I had to try one last time to make them see us. Really see us. Not a line item, not a violation. So I got dressed, not to impress them, but to disarm them. My nicest blouse, the one with the pearl buttons. I printed everything: Ava's discharge paperwork, her wheelchair prescription, a note from her surgeon, 2 photos of the ramp from different angles, and a handwritten statement I'd rewritten 3 times. It felt ridiculous, trying to translate a child's right to enter her own home into bullet points and photocopies. But if there was even a shred of decency left in that room, I was going to find it. The community center was quiet when I arrived. A few neighbors stood by the coffee station murmuring about fence height variances and the new lawn paint regulations. I sat near the back, clutching my folder like it could save us. The meeting room smelled like floor wax and artificial lemon. 5 HOA board members sat at a long table like judges. Nameplates, clipboards, matching polo shirts. They didn't look cruel. They looked indifferent. Diane sat in the center. HOA president, silver bob, lavender blazer. Her hands were perfectly still. They called my name. I stood. They gave me 3 minutes. I held the mic with both hands. My name is Elena Morales. I live at 17 Stonebridge. My daughter Ava is 9 years old. She had spinal surgery last year and uses a wheelchair full-time. We installed a temporary front ramp so she could safely enter our home. Pause. No interruptions. It's not decorative. It's not permanent. It's medical. It's essential. I didn't realize we needed approval. I'm new here. I'm asking for understanding, not special treatment. Diane nodded slowly, lips pursed. Thank you, Ms. Morales. We're very sorry about your daughter, but the HOA's concern is not about disability, it's about compliance. Compliance, I replied. Then let's talk about that. Your letter says the ramp is a violation of Article 4B, but that rule doesn't mention ADA compliance or exceptions for medical needs. The federal law does. Another board member, a man named Greg, mid-60s, blue golf vest, spoke up. You could have installed the ramp in the back. That way it wouldn't affect the front elevation. I blinked. Emergency services don't enter through the backyard. Deliveries don't come through the backyard. Ava doesn't live in the backyard. This is her front door. Diane smoothed the papers in front of her. The issue, Ms. Morales, is visual continuity. Maple Oaks has a character to maintain. We've had families with similar challenges follow the process correctly. You chose to bypass that. The word bypass sat in my throat like gravel. My daughter can't bypass the stairs, I said quietly. That was the moment I realized it wouldn't matter what I said. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict dressed up as procedure. I scanned the room. A few neighbors had shown up, mostly older couples with plastic water bottles and pursed lips. One man near the back whispered to his wife, "This is ridiculous." She nodded, but didn't speak. No one raised a hand, no one stood up, no one said, "She's right." I gathered my papers, no thank yous, no final words. I walked out before they could give their closing remarks. When I got home, Ava was sitting on the couch, watching cartoons, her bear tucked under her arm. She looked up when I walked in and asked, "Did they say it's okay?" I smiled. The kind of smile that hurts, because it holds back too much. "We're working on it," I said. And we were. But I was starting to realize something. They weren't trying to make it fair. They were trying to make it hard enough that I'd give up. The letter had given me 7 days. A full week to comply, to dismantle the one thing that made our house livable for Ava. A week to choose between breaking my daughter's access to her home or breaking under the weight of the consequences. I didn't comply. No, I couldn't. On day 8, the first fine arrived. $500, 0 cents. A plain envelope delivered without ceremony. No warning label, no knock. Just another piece of mail shoved between a flyer and a credit card offer. Inside, a single white sheet. Notice of violation. Daily fine issued, $500, 0 cents. Violation. Unauthorized exterior structure still present. Total due, $500, 0 cents. I didn't even read it twice. I knew this was only the beginning. On day 9, another fine, $1,000, 0 cents total. By day 10, we were at $1,500, 0 cents. By day 14, the number had ballooned to $3,500, 0 cents. Each envelope landed like a punch. Identical wording, new total, cold, mechanical, punishing. Then came day 15. A new envelope, slightly heavier paper, slightly thicker ink. Like they wanted this one to feel different. It then, daily fine issued, $1,000, 0 cents. Total due, $4,500, 0 cents. Continued non-compliance will result in further legal enforcement and lien proceedings. The rate had doubled overnight, and they didn't even have the decency to explain why. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the numbers. $1,000, 0 cents a day. 7 more days like this and I'd owe over $11, 0 cents. 2 weeks, $17.50. A month? I couldn't even calculate that far without my hands shaking. I called my bank, not because I had a plan, because I was trying to buy time. I asked for a deferral on my credit card payment. I had already used the hardship program once before. This time, I begged. The woman on the phone paused longer than I expected, then said softly, "I can give you 10 days. But that's the best I can do." I thanked her, hung up. Transferred the last $90, 0 cents from savings. Paid the power bill instead of the car. Groceries would have to stretch. I skipped dinner that night, told Ava I'd eaten earlier. She wanted to help in her own way. "Maybe we could paint the ramp pretty," she said, "with flowers. Then they'll like it." I kissed the top of her head and nodded like it was a good idea. She still believed they just needed to see the beauty in something before they changed their minds. I didn't. I tried talking to neighbors, people I'd waved at, people whose names I knew, people who had children. One woman gave a sympathetic frown and said, "They've always been a little intense. I'm sure it'll calm down." She didn't ask how Ava was doing. She didn't ask how I was doing. Another neighbor, Mrs. Redman, said something that stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. "They don't like anything that makes them feel uncomfortable," she whispered, eyes darting back toward the main road. "And your girl, she makes them feel something they don't want to feel." I thanked her, even though I didn't know what for. Ava stopped going outside. She didn't say why, she just pulled the blinds closed and said, "Too bright." She used to love being on the porch. Now she wouldn't even open the front door. Then one afternoon, she was sketching in her notebook at the window when one of the board members passed by on his phone, the same man who told me to just build the ramp in the back. He looked right at the house and said into the phone, laughing, "It's a wooden monstrosity. Honestly, it makes the whole street look like a rehab center." He didn't know she could hear him. She didn't eat dinner that night, just picked at her food and said her stomach hurt. Later, she climbed into bed early and lay staring at the ceiling. Then she asked, "Is the ramp ugly?" I froze. I said, "No. It's perfect." She looked down. Then, quietly, "Am I ugly too?" That's when I broke. After she fell asleep, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold tile. I didn't even try to hold it back. It wasn't the first time I cried in that house, but it was the first time I cried with hatred in my chest. This wasn't about property values, it wasn't about compliance, it wasn't about ramps. It was about erasing what they didn't want to see. And for the first time since moving in, I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a message. And now, I had one to send back. I stood up, wiped my face, looked in the mirror. "If they want to fight," I whispered, "they've got one." I felt hollow. That kind of resolve doesn't come with adrenaline. It comes with silence, a heavy kind. The kind that settles over your chest and makes you second-guess everything you just declared to the mirror the night before. The fines were still coming. The mailbox had become a weapon. I pulled the envelopes out like they were blades wrapped in paper. Clean, quiet, and effective. I didn't know what to do next, not really. I had no lawyer, no money for court, no time to organize protests or file endless appeals. I just knew I couldn't keep letting them tell this story like I wasn't in it. I couldn't afford a campaign, but I could afford the truth. That's what led me outside that afternoon. No plan, no speech, just instinct. Ava had fallen asleep on the ramp after therapy. She was too tired to make it all the way in. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, head resting against Pickles, her little service pup who never left her side. The sun was gentle. Her hair caught the light. The ramp, bare unpainted, ugly to them, held her, like it had always belonged there. I stood there for a long moment. Then I went inside, grabbed my phone, and took a photo. I didn't plan the words. I just sat at the kitchen table, looked at the picture, and typed. "My daughter has spinal surgery. She can't get into our home without this ramp. But our HOA says it's too ugly. Fines are adding up. $1,000, 0 cents a day now. We're being threatened with legal action. I'm just trying to keep her safe. Is that really so ugly?" I didn't tag anyone. I didn't add hashtags. I didn't dress it up in outrage. I just hit post, and then I closed the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and tried to breathe. I didn't expect anything, maybe a few kind comments, maybe a neighbor or two saying they were sorry. I thought it might help me feel a little less invisible. By the time I checked back an hour later, it had 300 shares. By lunchtime, it passed 1,000. My inbox was overflowing. People were tagging legal aid groups, veterans organizations, parenting forums, news outlets. Strangers offering to help me find a lawyer. People asking for my Venmo. A woman in Colorado wrote, "This just happened to my sister, she won." Someone else messaged, "I used to work for an HOA in Nevada. What they're doing is illegal." It was moving. Fast. Ava noticed before I told her. She was curled up on the couch with her tablet, scrolling through notifications on the lock screen. She turned to me and asked, "Why are there so many hearts on our picture?" I sat beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. "Because they see you," I said, "and they care." She didn't say anything at first. Then she smiled. It was soft, small, but real. The first real smile I'd seen in days. That night, the first reporter called. Her name was Jenna Young, local, probably just starting out. She said she saw the post through a friend and asked if I'd be willing to talk. Just a short interview. Just the facts. Unhesitated. I thought about Ava hearing that man call our ramp a monstrosity. I thought about the next envelope that would hit the mailbox the following morning. And I said yes. Jenna and a cameraman arrived the next afternoon with a small tripod and one clip mic. We sat on the porch. She asked questions. I answered simply. I didn't perform. I didn't campaign. I just told the truth. Ava sat beside me quietly the whole time, holding pickles in her lap. After they left, I opened Facebook again. The post had been shared over 5,000 times. There were comments from people in every state. A woman in Maine, a veteran in Arizona, a school counselor in Georgia, who said, "I've seen this happen. It starts quiet, then it crushes you." But there was one comment I couldn't stop rereading. It didn't have a name, just a sunflower profile picture, and a sentence so simple, it felt like something sacred. "You're not alone anymore. Keep fighting." I read it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop. The ramp was still there. The fines were still coming. But now, so were the eyes. And for the first time, I had the feeling the HOA had no idea what they'd just triggered. By the next morning, I had lost count of how many times the post had been shared. The number kept climbing. 10,000, 15. Messages flooded in. Facebook, Instagram, even my work email somehow. Some were short, "We're with you." Others were pages long, sharing their own HOA horror stories or thanking me for speaking out when they hadn't been able to. The video interview Jenna recorded aired on the local news that night. Just 3 minutes. But that was all it needed. A clip of Ava rolling slowly up the ramp, Pickles walking beside her. A few words from me. A close-up of the ramp. Plain, untreated wood, no fancy trim. Just safety. Just function. That clip made its way to a disability rights page on Twitter. That page had 4.3 million followers. Then it exploded. By the end of the day, a celebrity mom I'd followed for years retweeted it with the caption, "Imagine telling a child her safety is ugly." That's what this HOA did. Then came the others. An actor. A former Olympic athlete. A best-selling author. The video went viral on TikTok with captions like, "This is why HOAs need regulation," and "Accessibility isn't optional." I watched the story change shape. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about everybody who'd ever been silenced, fined, or shamed for not fitting into a box that someone else had drawn. By day 3, I got the call. A producer from a national morning show reached out. Polite, warm, very aware that things had gotten big. They wanted to feature the story. A segment on accessibility and community policy. They asked if Ava and I would be willing to do a remote interview from our home. I told them I needed to ask Ava first. When I explained it to her, she looked at me like I was joking. "Us," she whispered. "Us," I said. "They want to hear from you." She got quiet. Pickles licked her hand. Then she nodded. We recorded the interview from the living room. I wore makeup for the first time in weeks. Ava wore her favorite blue headband. She looked nervous, but proud. I looked tired, but steady. When the segment aired, I sat on the floor in front of the TV with Ava beside me. They showed clips of her going up and down the ramp, smiling shyly. A shot of the ramp from the sidewalk. A still of the original Facebook post. Then my voice, saying, "I'm not asking for pity. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for basic safety. For my daughter to enter her own home without being punished for it." The anchor ended the segment with a quiet, pointed line. We reached out to the HOA for comment. They declined. The response was immediate. Hundreds of emails, letters, comments, donations. A stranger started a crowdfunding page. By the end of the week, it had raised $18,000, 0 cents. I hadn't asked for it. I didn't know what to do with it. But I knew one thing for sure. It wouldn't be wasted. It would go to something real, something solid, something they couldn't erase. And just as the hope started to creep in, the HOA reminded me of who they were. Another envelope, this one from their legal counsel. A formal notice accusing me of violating the community confidentiality clause by posting photos and statements that could bring dishonor and reputational harm to Maple Oaks Crossing. I read it twice. Then I read the last line. A cease and desist order. I didn't rip it up. I didn't cry. I just folded it quietly and placed it on the kitchen table. That night, as I sat beside Ava during bedtime, she asked, "Are they mad?" I said, "Yes." She thought for a moment, then said, "They think they can scare you." "They're trying," I said. She looked at me and smiled with the kind of boldness only a child can get away with. They're the ones who are scared. They didn't flinch. That's what struck me. After the post went viral, after the TV segment aired, after people across the country were demanding answers, they didn't flinch. No apology, no phone call, not even a cold knock at the door. Instead, they doubled down. It started with another fine, not one of the original daily charges. This one was new. $100, 0 cents a day. Labeled in thick black letters, additional penalty due to willful non-compliance. It was their way of saying, you're not just wrong, you're defiant. The notice warned that if my total balance exceeded $5,000, 0 cents, they would move forward with lien placement on the property. They weren't just trying to punish me. They were trying to take the house. I didn't have a real lawyer, but I had something better. A friend of a stranger who sent me a message after the TV segment aired. She worked at a disability rights nonprofit and offered to connect me to someone. 3 days later, I had a pro bono attorney. Her name was Claire. Sharp, calm, and unshakable. She read through everything. The original letter, the HOA bylaws, the fine notices, the cease and desist. She circled terms, highlighted contradictions, and asked exactly 2 questions. Do you have medical documentation? Yes. Did they ever offer a variance or alternative accommodation? No. She looked up. Then they're bluffing. I blinked. Even with the lien threat? They're counting on you not knowing the law. This is textbook intimidation. But now they've drawn enough attention that they're creating liability for themselves. I didn't cry. I stood. But instead I nodded and let the silence between us do the rest. Claire began drafting the formal complaint. She said she'd file it with the state attorney general's office by the end of the week. But the HOA wasn't done. They changed tactics. If they couldn't scare me into silence with fines, they'd bury me in technicalities. And inspectors started showing up weekly. Not city officials, HOA code inspectors. People I'd never seen before holding clipboards and snapping photos. One gave me a warning for overgrown grass in a strip along the sidewalk, 2 inches over the rule. Another cited trash bin, left visible beyond pickup hours. I had rolled it back an hour late because Ava had needed help with her wheelchair ramp. Then I saw it. Not a board member. The same one who called the ramp a monstrosity. Parked across the street in a silver sedan, taking pictures of my home through his windshield. He didn't even look away when I stepped outside, just held the camera steady, then drove off without a word. That's when the neighborhood began to split. One morning, I found an anonymous note taped to my mailbox. Plain paper. Black marker. You're ruining the neighborhood. But that same evening, a neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door. She held out a small container of muffins, banana walnut, and said in a whisper, "Keep going. They're bullies, and some of us are watching." I thanked her. Not just for the food, for the reminder that not every porch hides cruelty. But I knew I couldn't rely on muffins and whispers. So I said yes when a friend of Claire's invited me onto a local podcast. It wasn't flashy, just a basement mic and a quiet host named Tom who used to work in local government. But when he asked me to tell the story, I didn't hold back. They say this is about a ramp, but let's be honest, it's about power. If this is how they treat a child in a wheelchair, then none of us are safe. The next morning, the podcast had 2,000 listens, then 6, 0. The story was getting harder to bury. Claire filed the complaint that afternoon. It was official now. The HOA, and now they had one. The complaint had been filed. The podcast was still circulating. More podcasts had reached out. A few small media outlets, too. But none of it slowed them down. The HOA didn't blink. Not when the story trended locally. Not when national disability advocates started tagging them in posts. Not even when Claire began mentioning potential ADA violations in writing. They just kept sending fines. By the end of the third week, my total balance had passed $20,000, 0 cents. Claire said they hadn't filed the lien yet, but they were getting close. That was the atmosphere I was living in, waiting for the knock. The sheriff, the order, the point of no return. So when I heard tires crunch on the driveway and saw a black SUV pull in, I froze. It wasn't a marked car. No local plates, tinted windows. 2 people stepped out. One in a dark suit, the other in slacks and a government-issued lanyard. I opened the door slowly. The man spoke first, calm, even. "Mrs. Morales, I'm David Barnes. This is my colleague Nicole. We're with the governor's office." I stared at him. "He's been following your story," he continued, "and he'd like to come visit, not for press, not for headlines, because he believes this matters." I blinked. My mouth was dry. The governor?" David nodded. "He has a daughter. She's 17. Cerebral palsy. He knows what a ramp means. And he knows what it means when someone tries to take it away." I let them in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place I had cried, calculated fines, and drafted the Facebook post that started it all. Nicole pulled out a notepad. "We're not here to make promises, not yet. But we are here to listen." And looked at them both, and I felt it. For the first time, someone with power wasn't looking through me. They were looking at me. At us. At Ava's drawings on the fridge. At the ramp through the window. At the way my hands trembled when I reached for the glass of water in front of me. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Why me?" Nicole smiled. Not like a politician. Like a mother. "Because your voice reached places their rules couldn't." The room fell silent. But it wasn't heavy. It was full. David leaned forward. "The governor would like to visit in person. 4 days from now. If that's okay." I nodded. "Keep it quiet," he said gently. "No press alert. Just be ready." They stood. I walked them to the door. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the fight was closing in. I felt like help was walking toward us. The next 4 days moved in slow motion and fast forward at the same time. Every hour felt like a countdown. Every night, Ava asked the same question in a whisper. "He's really coming?" And I'd say yes. Then I'd lie awake wondering what I was supposed to do, Clean the porch, repaint the ramp, fix the flower bed. The fines were still coming after all. My bank account was still empty. But I didn't clean anything. I left it all as it was. On the morning of the visit, the street was already blocked off by 9 a.m. 2 cruisers at either end. Uniformed officers standing beside them, calm but alert. A quiet buzz spread across the neighborhood like static. People pretending not to look, but peeking from behind blinds, standing too long at their mailboxes, pulling out lawn chairs just a little too early in the day. I saw cameras being set up across the street, tripods, lenses, boom mics, press vans with satellite dishes on top. I asked David, the aide from the governor's office, if it was supposed to be this public. He just smiled. That's not coming from us. At 10:27, a black SUV pulled up to the curb, 2 more vehicles behind it. The door opened, and the governor stepped out. I had seen him on TV dozens of times, but this was different. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't performing. He looked like a man walking into someone's home, not someone's headline. He wore a dark gray suit, no tie. Beside him were 2 ADA advocates, both in wheelchairs. And behind them, a woman carrying a thick binder and a stack of folders that looked far too heavy. He didn't speak right away. He looked at the house. Then he looked at the ramp. Then he looked at Ava. She was waiting at the top, sitting tall in her chair, pickles at her feet. Her hair was brushed back in a braid, and her blue headband shimmered in the sun. The governor walked slowly up the ramp. When he reached her, he didn't bend like a politician. He didn't crouch like he was about to pose for a photo. He knelt, on both knees, right there on the wood they had called a violation. And he said softly, clearly, "This is what freedom looks like." The cameras clicked. The shutters echoed down the street. He stood, turned to face the small crowd that had gathered, neighbors, reporters, aides, and spoke into the microphone on the porch. No family should ever be fined for caring. No child should be punished for existing. This ramp isn't a violation. It's a reminder that laws are only as decent as the people who enforce them. He turned toward me. "Miss Morales, you didn't just build a ramp. You built a message. One that made it all the way to the State House, and it made us listen." There was no applause, just stillness. Then one small bark. Pickles, as if on cue. It broke the moment just enough for Ava to giggle, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. I looked around. The HOA board was nowhere to be seen, but one person spotted something. Movement in a window. Her curtain slipped shut just as the camera panned past. The moment had arrived. She hadn't, and that said more than any press release could. As the governor thanked the crowd and turned back toward his car, Ava reached over and took my hand. I smiled, not because it was over, but because, for the first time, I could breathe. The visit could have ended there. The photo of the governor kneeling beside Ava. The words that swept across every phone screen before nightfall. The clip that played on cable news all evening. It could have been enough. But it wasn't, because 2 days later, they came back. Not just the governor this time, but his staff, 3 state legislators, 2 ADA lawyers, and the heads of several disability advocacy organizations. And this time, they brought a podium. They set it up on our front lawn, right beside the ramp. Same unpainted boards, same view of the street, same house they once said didn't fit the aesthetic. David pulled me aside before it began. "We didn't want to do this in a courthouse," he said. "We wanted it where the fight started." By late morning, the media had arrived. Not just local press, national outlets. CNN, Fox, NPR. The Daily Mail had a drone hovering above the driveway. A trending hashtag had started the night before. The ramp that changed the law. And that's exactly what was about to happen. The governor took the podium. Behind him stood people in wheelchairs, parents, children, lawyers, lawmakers, and me. Ava stayed on the porch with pickles in her lap. She watched every word. "We're here to close a loophole," he said, "because it should not take a viral post to protect a child's dignity." He held up a thick folder, flipped to the front page, and signed it right there, his signature crisp and slow beneath the seal of the state. "This order prohibits any HOA in this state from enforcing aesthetic regulations that interfere with ADA-compliant accessibility features, effective immediately." Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The governor smiled, waved a hand, and continued. "We can't legislate compassion, but we can legislate against cruelty." And we just did. It didn't stop there. He called on the legislature to pass a broader bill, statewide protections for disabled residents living in privately governed communities. More oversight, more transparency, more power in the hands of families, not boards with clipboards. The crowd applauded. A few people cried. Me? I just stood still and listened, because I knew this wasn't really about us anymore. Not now. Claire, my attorney, leaned over and whispered, "You're the case they'll cite now. When other people fight back, you'll be the reason they don't feel alone." Within 24 hours, every major outlet had the headline. The governor signs executive order after HOA targets disabled child. Mom's fight against HOA leads to state reform. The ramp that sparked a movement? One advocacy group launched a new initiative the same day. A public database of HOA abuse cases, organized by state, category, and legal outcome. My story was listed at the top, with photos, a timeline, and the words, "Status, Restolved." That afternoon, as the cameras began to pack up and the reporters loaded their gear, a woman from 3 houses down walked slowly toward me. We'd never spoken. I only knew her name because it was printed on the HOA newsletter. She kept her eyes low at first. Then she looked up and said softly, "I was wrong. I should have spoken up sooner." I didn't yell. I didn't freeze her out. I just nodded and said, "We all have a chance now." She blinked, then nodded back and walked away. And I stood in the yard where the fines used to land and where the law had just changed. And for the first time, we weren't fighting anymore. We were winning. After the executive order was signed, everything got quieter, but not softer. It wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The story had taken on a life of its own. People still drove by slowly. News outlets still emailed. Advocacy groups still tagged me in updates and progress reports. I was no longer fighting to be heard, but I was still learning how to speak with a voice people suddenly listened to. And then came the fallout. 2 weeks after the governor's visit, 2 HOA board members resigned. No fanfare, no explanation, just their names removed from the monthly newsletter and a line at the bottom that read, "We thank them for their service." Then Diane, who hadn't been seen publicly since the day she was spotted behind her curtain, finally broke her silence. She released a statement through a PR firm, 3 paragraphs long, polished, soulless. "While we maintain our commitment to upholding Maple Oaks Crossing's community standards, we acknowledge that our recent handling of one particular case failed to reflect the compassion we strive to balance alongside our regulatory responsibilities." It was defensive, vague, and drenched in legal hedge words, and the public didn't buy a word of it. A recall petition began circulating 2 days later. Not from me, from within. The neighborhood had shifted. People who had once nodded silently at HOA decisions were now raising their hands, asking questions, attending meetings, refusing to be steamrolled again. A local columnist summed it up best in the Sunday paper. Maple Oaks cared more about beige siding than a child's well-being. And the world saw it. That headline sat on coffee tables for a week. More residents started sharing their own stories. A woman across the subdivision said her request to build a sensory garden for her autistic son had been denied because the flowers weren't native. A man on the next block told Claire, my attorney, that he'd once been threatened with fines for installing solar panels to power his father's oxygen machine. They had stayed silent. Until now. The HOA couldn't fix its image fast enough. Reporters started referring to it as the Ramp Rebellion HOA. Someone created a parody Twitter account that mocked their regulations with fake violations like lawn too cheerful and child's laugh exceeded decibel limits. It went viral. And even though I didn't engage, I'll admit, I laughed once or twice. Then one morning, a letter arrived. Not from the HOA, from the state. It was an official invitation to testify before the legislature as they drafted a permanent accessibility protection bill to expand on the governor's executive order. Claire called me an hour later. "They don't just want your case," she said. "They want your voice." I stared at the letter for a long time. Ava was doing puzzles in the next room. Pickles lay curled up at her feet. I thought about everything we'd been through. And I thought, if this is what came from a ramp they called ugly, what could come next? It didn't happen overnight. After the dust settled, after the cameras left, the hearings began, and the fines were erased. It took time to feel normal again. Or at least, a new version of normal. The kind where your home is no longer a battleground, but a place that holds what you fought for. We stayed. Some neighbors moved out, but we didn't. I didn't want to leave the house where Ava learned to stand up in ways she never had before. I didn't want to abandon the ramp that carried all our pain and all our power. But we did rebuild it. Months passed. The donations had long since stopped coming, but the fund that strangers started had grown more than I ever imagined. People had given what they could, and we didn't waste a cent. I hired a local builder with experience in accessible design. His brother used a chair too. He didn't ask for permits. He just asked what Ava loved. She told him flowers, birds, blue, stars, stopples. The new ramp was permanent, reinforced, stained a soft walnut brown, lined with planter boxes filled with marigolds and lavender. The rails were wide and smooth, painted a bright sky blue. At the base of the ramp there was a mural, a small one, painted by Ava herself. It showed her wheelchair drawn in crayon colors, with wings coming off the sides. Below it, in her handwriting, to Manthus it said, "This is how I fly." It wasn't HOA approved, but it didn't need to be, because now the rules worked for us, not against us. One late afternoon, I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade, watching Ava race down the new ramp. She didn't just descend. She zoomed. She fell. At the bottom, she turned sharp and spun the chair in a perfect circle, arms lifted like a figure skater. Pickles barked and chased after her, nipping at the wheels like it was a game. Her laughter, real, loud, unafraid, echoed off every beige house on the street. And for the first time since moving in, I didn't care who heard. I didn't check the windows. I didn't scan for board members. I just watched her, live, free, unapologetically herself. And I thought, they saw something ugly. I saw survival. She saw freedom. And now, the world sees strength. The ramp was never the eyesore. The silence was. And when we broke it, when we told the truth, we didn't just win a fight. We opened a door. They came for our ramp. But what they really destroyed was the wall we'd all been hiding behind. If this story moves you, subscribe for more and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next fight for what's right.